Today's video is sponsored by Native Sons Goods, makers of the highest quality woven guitar, bag, and camera straps you'll ever see. Native Sons straps are handmade one at a time in the USA with unparalleled love and care. Click the link in the description to check out their new expanded lineup featuring all new 3-inch guitar straps. And remember, when you support my sponsor, you support this channel, and I sure appreciate it.
Hey y'all, it's Shitpost Friday.
Let's settle this once and for all. Who's the strongest Brad out there?
Hello, all you good and sexy people. Brad the Guitologist here. It's time again for Shitpost Friday. You guys might have noticed I have not had a Shitpost Friday in a couple weeks. That's because I had my nose worked on. I had a surgery done to fix a deviated septum on my nose, and it was kind of a minor surgery, but it didn't seem minor to me because I woke up kind of in a funk that lasted about a week and just flushing all the crap out of my nose and could barely talk, and it's getting a little bit better now. I did do one video the other day with Boaz when he came by, and I want to thank Boaz and his friend Morris for stopping by and bringing their awesome guitar. If you guys haven't seen that video yet, check that out. I'll post a link down in the description for you to check out the Boaz One guitars. I did say in that that they were going to do a crowdfunding thing on Indiegogo, and I wasn't sure when they were going to start it, but they've told me since that they're going to start the middle of this month with that Indiegogo, and I will keep you guys updated whenever that finally gets announced. Also, in past news, we've gotten some updates on Lucky Dog guitars. We reported on this channel a while back how Fender was going after them legally and trying to shut him down and prevent him from using the headstock that he had been using and had redesigned already. And just kind of, you know, it just seemed to me like he was being pushed around a little bit, so I wanted to bring some light to that. And apparently it worked, and he raised about $11,000, I think, between his GoFundMe and some private money, I guess, that was donated to him. But he has announced that they have come to an agreement and that he will be refunding all of the GoFundMe money that he got.
It's been a long time with a lot of back and forth, but I just want to let you know that dispute has been resolved. Lucky Dog, you know, gets to keep our signature headstock. So that's something that makes me very happy. There was a lot of donations that were given, coming out to be a little over $11,000. And I reached out to GoFundMe about 15 minutes ago and asked them to refund all donors that gave money on GoFundMe. And again, there was people that gave like $3,000, $1,000, $500, $5. Anyway, all it showed me is you guys had my back and supported me when I needed you. So I thank you a lot.
So anybody who donated to that from this channel, you should see a refund eventually for that. So we're really glad that he was able to work that out with Fender, and that that's been resolved. Also, in giving you an update on something we've reported in the past, the pants stuffer. You know, the guy who was down around Nashville stuffing guitars down his pants. Well, he turned himself in, apparently. My guess is he wanted to get himself off the streets as soon as possible because he saw himself on the Guitologist channel and did not want his hands cut off. Wise move there, buddy. Wise move. Just for the record, I do not encourage vigilante justice. Always, not always, at least. I did watch a marathon of Death Wish movies the other night with my wife, and
yeah, right on, man.
Pretty much the whole time I was there going, yes, you get that scumbag. That reminds me, I need to start the Dirty Harry series soon. On to somewhat sad news. You know, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also sad. Vinnie Paul has finally gotten a marker laid beside his brother's marker. You could see a picture here, and just, you know, it was a sad reminder. I kind of saw this pop up on my Facebook the other day. Somebody posted it, that he had finally gotten his grave marker placed beside Dimebag's grave marker. And this has become quite the pilgrimage site for fans. You know, they'll have their pictures taken with this grave marker, and you know, I think it's a place where people can go and remember the good times they've had listening to Pantera music and, of course, Damage Plan music. But Vinnie Paul has been laid to rest there also, and he now has a marker that is in line with what his brothers had. So that's nice. It's good to see. Also in sad news, we just lost Dr. John. Dr. John was a a musician who, he was 77 years old when he died of a heart attack. He actually died today, I think, on Thursday. And not a guitar player, but a piano player, a songwriter. He wrote a lot of theme songs, things like Curious George theme song. He wrote, a lot of funk music, a lot of rock music. A lot of stuff through the 70s that I'm sure people would recognize. He's recorded also on a lot of other people's albums, Rolling Stones and people like that over the years, and won like 6 Grammys, and was just a real contributor in the music scene, and he will definitely be missed as well. Now on to the big news this week. Of course, everybody has heard about the threatened tariffs that Donald Trump is going to place on Mexican goods coming into the United States. This is definitely something that anyone who plays guitar in the United States should keep an eye on, because apparently this tariff is going to be on all goods that are imported into the United States from Mexico, pretty indiscriminate, and that's going to encompass a lot of guitar companies and their products as well. So this might be a good time, if you've had your eye on some things that are Mexican made, to go ahead and pick those things up before the 5% tariff kicks in, and then I think it's going to go up to 10, and then 15, 20, and all the way up to 25%. If it goes that far. I'm not sure exactly what the demands are. I haven't kept up exactly with what Mexico is required to do in order to avoid these tariffs on the products coming into the U.S. But I'll let everybody else pontificate about that. But mainly for us guitarists, what you want to kind of look out for are anything obviously that are Fender made in Mexico, such as the Player series, of course. Fender, I'm not sure if they make their strings in Mexico also, but I know Martin makes their strings. Martin also makes some of their cheaper guitars, like the LX and the HPL series. Pretty much all their laminate kind of stuff, I think, is made down there. Also, their backpacker guitars are made in Navajo, Mexico. Also Taylor guitars, anything that's laminate, their Academy series are made in Tecate, Mexico. So, if you have your eye on any of those things, now might be a good time to try to pick those up before the prices go up on those. And here's the thing, though. You might want to, if you have your eye on any of their products, whether it's a Fender, whether it's a Taylor or a Martin, usually prices will hike. They'll hike definitely after the first of the year. There's usually a price change around then. There's also usually new price lists come out sort of in the middle of the year as well, kind of around Summer NAMM a lot of times. I'm not sure on those three when their price lists come out or when their prices change, but they may also have a mid-year price increase due to this, the tariffs on these Mexican goods. And the thing is, they're going to raise the prices not just on the Mexican stuff. They're going to raise the prices on all their stuff across the board, and they're going to keep, their price structure in line with how it is now. But they're just going to take the increased costs and they're just going to disperse it throughout the lines, most likely. They won't put the entire increase just on their Mexican products. And that's something that you're going to have to understand as well. Just because something that you're buying from a company is not their Mexican product or their Mexican version, of their other product, maybe that's made in the U.S. or elsewhere, doesn't mean that those products won't go up in price as well. And just to keep their pricing structures in order. So that, definitely look out for that and keep that in mind as you kind of contemplate any purchases here from any of these companies. Okay, also I wanted to talk about this, and I meant to actually talk about this last week, but of course I had my surgery and I did not do a Shitpost Friday last week. But this was going to be the other main story I wanted to talk about. NBC's Songland has started to air, and I think there might already be a couple of episodes out. But let this be a warning for anyone who is contemplating going on one of these types of shows. If you're going on American Idol or if you're going on one of these other singing shows, usually you're singing cover songs and all that kind of stuff, so it really doesn't apply to you and it doesn't matter much. Whenever you sign one of their agreements, you're basically signing away a lot of things like the rights to your image, and probably other types of rights like synchronization for anything that you've recorded while on the show and all that sort of thing. But you're not signing away rights to any of your own music, which is weirdly enough, I mean, just scarily enough, I suppose, is what they're asking people to do when they sign up to go on this show, Songland. If you guys don't know anything about Songland, it's basically this NBC program that they've started where they're asking people who are songwriters to come on, and they'll write their songs or they'll use songs that they've already written to go through this show. And the thing is, if you actually read the fine print on this, and this came out a long time ago, I think they started this in 2014. They started talking about this show, and Adam Levine was going to be part of it or whatever. And even that far back, there was a lawyer who came out and said, "Hey, I have the agreement that you have to have when you go on this show, and it's very scary for artists. You do not want to sign something like this without consulting a lawyer, because you're basically signing away all of the rights to all of the songs that are yours that will be used on this show. You're signing away all your rights for synchronization. You're signing away you're giving away the copyright essentially to NBC when you go on this show." And it was funny, and this is really how it really shows you the sick nature of news and the sick nature of PR and the sick state of people's ability to critically think about things. Because after this lawyer came out with this, he came out with this article basically just slamming them and saying, "Hey, you guys are taking advantage of musicians and artists here, songwriters. You're asking them to give up all of their rights to their songs." Well, right after that, NBC went in and they changed just a couple of lines in there. They kind of rearranged a couple of things and said, in response to the criticisms, we've changed our agreement. But the thing is, if you actually go and read the changed agreement, they didn't change any of the things that the guy was complaining about. So anybody, basically, if you went on this show, you're going to get screwed. You basically, you might as well just bend over, spread your cheeks, and ask for it, because that's what you're going to get. So if I were you, if I were a songwriter and I was contemplating going on a show like this, I would definitely think twice. I would get a copy of the up-to-date agreement that you have to sign to go on such a show, and have a lawyer go over it with a fine-tooth comb, because you're probably going to find that they're trying to screw you royally. So, fair warning. Also, one more bit of news. I reported a couple weeks back over on Channel 2 that CITES, the COP18, that's the Conference of Parties number 18, which was scheduled to be held at the end of May of this year, which was also going to be the conference at which the MIA, which is the Music Industries Association, was going to propose some of their changes to the CITES agreement, which would have allowed exceptions for Rosewood and probably some other woods, I think, also for musical instrument purposes. That would have made it a lot easier for people to transport Rosewood again. It would have basically reverted things back to the way that they were before the CITES COP17. Anyway, that was postponed due to a terrorist act in Sri Lanka, but it looks like they have, they're going to reschedule for the 1st through the 13th of September. That's when they're proposing that will be held. So, at least for the time being, for most of this year, most of 2019, Rosewood will still be kind of off base for guitar manufacturers. If they don't want to have to get, paperwork for each and every guitar that they make. Okay, well that will do it for the news. Alright guys, let's do some Ask an Amp Tech.
When you don't know what the fuck you're doing, time for Ask an Amp Tech.
Okay, so this first question comes from Greg Struman. And he says, "Hey Brad, I watch your channel all the time, so I know you're pretty much buried on work right now." Yeah, man, you don't know the half of it. I don't even know if you're taking on anything at the moment, but I was hoping maybe I could get your advice. I've got an old DOD PDS 2020 multi-tap pedal, and it works, but it doesn't. It passes signal and the effects and signal for a minute or two, and then suddenly stops affecting the signal. It still powers, still passes the signal, just doesn't actually do what it's supposed to. So there's no In other words, it's not mixing in the effect. I spoke to a guy who works on these, but he said he's buried in work for a long time and bets money it's probably just caps that need to be replaced. I learned some things watching your channel. A lot. Thank you, by the way. You're very welcome. I'm glad you learned something. But I don't think I'm competent enough to check the values of components. I have a board. I have the board out, and I do have an electronic meter, but I'm unsure how to test and read components. So first of all, yeah, I concur with your other technician that you spoke to that it could very well be caps. So, you know, if you say you don't have a way to test those caps, that's fine. You probably don't even need to test those caps as long as you're competent with a soldering iron. And as long as you use a solder sucker or something to get the solder off the board, and you can remove those caps without damaging the traces that are on the board. A lot of traces, especially on pedals, tend to be very weak, so just be very careful with that. Well, first, actually, before you replace all of those, I would check for any kind of broken solder joints or anything like that. Again, a lot of traces on these little boards can be very weak and prone to damage, so just look very closely at all of the solder joints on all the pads. Also, make sure that you know all the components are properly soldered. You might even take your soldering iron and a little bit of solder and just resolder all of the joints that look suspect to you. Make sure you use some good leaded solder. Don't use any of the lead-free crap that's coming out of like China and stuff these days. It's just really crappy solder. So you might add a little bit of leaded solder to any of the joints that look suspect. Check it again and see if the problem goes away. If the problem still persists, and you probably have something going on with either an IC, that's an integrated circuit, or a transistor. A lot of times transistors will display the symptoms that you just identified. A lot of times they will work for a little bit and then they'll just stop working mysteriously, and you know, nobody really knows the wherefores or whys on that. It's just transistors at some point in their life cycle go flaky, and it's time just to replace them at that point. Depending on the type of transistor it is, if it is a bad one, you know, usually those are just extremely cheap, and you can usually shotgun transistors about as cheaply as you could shotgun most other components on a pedal like this. So, you know, if you identify a transistor that might be a problem, you can test it if you want, but usually, you know, if it's passing signal or if it's affecting the signal at one point and then not affecting the signal at another point, then it's being flaky, so that your test is going to be invalid anyway. So that's going to be a thing that you probably will just want to go ahead and replace. But on this particular pedal, again, I don't have a schematic for this particular pedal. Let me see if I can find one really quickly, but I'm thinking that you probably, because you said it's passing signal, but that doesn't affect the signal at some point. So I'm guessing that there's two signal paths through this thing. So one of the paths, you know, will just pass the signal straight through. It also could be that, you know, again, there's a connection on the board, the connection that is, you know, directing the signal through the pedal is bad. So, you know, that could be a connection issue. But again, it could also be, you know, something with a transistor or IC going bad. So you really won't know unless you replace the transistor or IC. And usually those are so cheap. It's just a matter of you finding the time to sit down and replace them. It's not going to be an expensive proposition with anything but your time. So as long as you got the time to do it and you got the skill to solder, I would just start replacing. Again, I would do the caps first, check the board for bad solders, and then after that, if it still didn't fix it, I would probably go ahead and move on to the transistors or ICs that you see and try to replace those. And a lot of times, you know, if you get generic versions of whatever's in there, it's probably going to work exactly the same way as it did. And, you know, obviously just make sure you put everything in back in the way it came out, and you should be able to fix this without really too much technical knowledge or really even testing, and that's usually been my experience with most pedals, that, you know, it doesn't require really a lot of tracing. It would be nice to be able to find a schematic. Okay, it looks like it's listed as a Digitech product on this one site that I found. And yes, indeed, I think I've found the schematic here. So I will link the schematic down in the description, so you'll be able to see that. And it does look like this thing has a plethora of ICs in it. So you know, and I don't know if these are socketed. Are they socketed? Yeah, some of the ICs look like they're socketed. So it may be also a case where you can go in and you can just very gently, and you know, you have to do this, maybe watch some videos on how to remove ICs, you know, gently. But you can remove ICs from the socket, you know, wiggle them out of place, spray contact cleaner in there, and then put them back in, and you may be able to clean the sockets. And that could also be your problem, that the sockets for one or more of these ICs is just, you know, corroded or oxidized and not getting good connection. And that would be one reason why this could happen as well. So, you know, without having the thing here and without being able to test things on my own, those are the suggestions that I would tell you to start with. So hopefully that helps you out. Okay, this next question comes from Trevor Hall, and he says, dude, I've been banging my head against the wall. I'm building a Matchless Spitfire clone, and I have a question about wiring the 5AR4 rectifier tube. I have a 290-0290 transformer like the one for the 18-watt Marshall. It has one 6.3 volt lead, one 5-volt lead, I think he means winding, and one 0-volt center tap. I know both of the 290 leads go to pin 4 and pin 6. What voltage goes to pin 2 and pin 8? And he's talking about pin 2 and pin 8 of the 5AR4 rectifier tube. Well, if we look at the 5AR4, we can see that pins 2 and pin 8 are the filaments. So attached to the filaments, actually, if you just forget about for a minute about the Spitfire clone, the best thing you can do is just go and look up, you know, basically any Fender that uses a similar rectifier tube. We'll just pick one at random. We'll pick the Fender Princeton, the AA964 schematic. If we look at the schematic, in the power section, most power sections on tube amplifiers of this type are going to be very similar, and you can see there that the pin 2 and pin 8 are actually tied to the 5-volt winding, and also off of that, you know, goes the B plus. So you've got the 5-volt going to one, you got 5-volt going to the other, and off of one of those you're going to have your B plus that comes off and gets filtered in a node, and so that's your B plus DC supply. But the thing, you know, and I understand how that can be confusing for a lot of first-time builders, because you have a 5-volt, you're tying your 5 volts there that that's gonna power up your filaments. But that's also being tied to hundreds of volts. So you're like, well, why is there 5 volts there if it's got hundreds of volts, and what's going on? Well, what's going on there is, and that's a good question, but what's going on is you have 5 volts of AC voltage right there. That's powering the filaments, because the filaments are AC. So, and on that same line, you have riding hundreds of volts, which is your B plus, that's being generated or being rectified by the rectifier tube and supplying the rest of the amp. So you can have actually AC voltage and DC voltage riding on the same wire. So that's something to remember and consider as you work on any kind of tube amps, because you're going to have this same issue anywhere in the amplifier, especially in the signal chain where your guitar signal is passing through. You're going to have, you know, in a lot of cases on the plates of the tubes, for instance, you're going to have hundreds of DC volts, but you're also going to have your very low AC voltage on that same wire that's, you know, that goes on to the next stage. So you've got two things there to consider. You have the AC signal, and you also have a very high voltage DC signal in the same place. So that's probably why you were getting a little bit confused. And so, yeah, hopefully that helps you out. All right, this question comes from Stephen Friedman, and Stephen writes, I've got a Supro 6422 TR. Congratulations, Stephen. That's one of my favorite amplifiers of all time. And the reverb isn't working, he says. When I pluck the spring, I guess you already have the reverb tank open then. When you pluck the spring, you can hear it through the speaker, so I'm getting signal through, but when I play the guitar, no reverb. I've been racking my brain trying to fix it, and I feel like I'm running out of ideas. I have the Gretsch G6152 schematic in front of me for reference. Any help on where to look for the problem would be insanely appreciated. Okay, Steven, this is actually a model that I have a lot of familiarity with. They made a couple of different versions of this amplifier, Valco did, and put various badges on them. Of course, you've already figured out that the Gretsch G6152 is the same amplifier and are using that schematic. That schematic is extremely close, almost the same. They also made a national version, which is the N6422TR. They also made an airline version, which I have done a video on. That is the 62-9025A. If you go back through my videos, you can find it, or I will post a link down in the description to this video directing you to that video where I actually did an entire troubleshooting on the airline 62-9025A, and that one also, the reverb did not work. And what fixed it for me, and I had the same problem as you did. I got signal out of the reverb tank, but no signal seemed to be passing through the reverb tank. So what I did was I isolated it down and found out that inside the reverb tank, one of the springs had broken off on this thing, and it had been flopping around for a while, and it had actually rubbed, a couple of the wires had rubbed themselves bare. You can see right there. The wire has been worn bare. I don't know if it's rubbing on the other side. Definitely on this side facing me, it's bare. Maybe it's bare on the other side as well. I'm gonna do some measurements from the tip and from the sleeve to these points up here, and see if they're continuous or if they're shorting out. Or I'm gonna measure them across too and see if they're shorting out. When I opened this thing up first, one of these springs was broken off and the tank was kind of flopping around sideways. But I've got that reattached, and it's at least suspended like it should be. But I don't know, maybe it flopping around like that caused the wires to rub somewhere. On this side they don't seem bad, but this is the output side, so that's the side that, you know, we determined was probably working, because we actually got signal out of the thing. We could rattle it around and signal will come out, but it didn't seem as if signal was going in. We had a couple of little bare wire parts, and I kind of just moved them away from the actual chassis of the tank, and we're going to see how it goes. But here's the moment of truth. I got a guitar plugged in, and here we go. Let's see if we've gotten it. Oh! We have reverb. That's a beautiful sound. They were grounding themselves out against the part of the reverb tank, so they were basically being grounded out. So actually the first thing you might do is, you know, you already have the reverb tank open. Inspect inside the reverb tank and look for clues where it might be grounding itself out. So what you need to do is start with the RCA jack. You can put your meter like on the inside of the RCA jack. So that'll be the actual tip you'll be measuring. And then you can go, you'll follow the wire from the tip and go up to the inductor on the tank. Make sure you have continuity right there. Also touch it to somewhere on the chassis of the reverb and make sure that's not being grounded out. Then you can go to the outside of the RCA jack, and then you can trace that wire in the other end and make sure that's continuous. Make sure that those wires are not being grounded out. If that doesn't work, here's the Gretsch 6152 schematic. Right here is this is the transformer. This is the stage that pushes through the signal through this first half of the reverb transformer. On the other side of the reverb transformer, it gets picked up. The signal then goes through this half of the reverb tank, through the springs, out of the other inductor coil, and then on out. So you know that from here, so the spring over, you're getting signal out. So everything from here over this way is good. So you might actually focus on if it's not inside of the, if it's not inside of this half of the reverb tank right here, like it was on my example, it could be right here on this switch. This switch right here could be grounded out somehow on the chassis. I have had problems like that before as well. What you want to do is actually remove this switch jack from the chassis. So just take the nut off of the switch jack chassis that switches the reverb. Take it out and just leave it hanging for a minute, just in midair, and then try it again and see if it works. If it does work, then you know you have a bad insulator that was supposed to insulate this from touching the chassis. Yeah, best of luck to you. Hopefully that will give you at least some direction.
When you don't know what the fuck you're doing, jump your ass to the napkin.
Alright guys, that'll do it for this Shitpost Friday. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please hit subscribe down below. Hit the bell to receive all notifications. Also like and share this video far and wide. You know, a lot of times YouTube just seems to just turn off notifications, and it would really help me out if you guys comment, like, and share as always. But anyway, do all those things for me because I asked, because I'm nice, and because you love me. And we'll see y'all later.